I thought we'd try a different angle today. I don't know if it's working. I'm on the floor with the tripod. I don't know where to put it. Maybe there? Yeah, and then I can sit over here. Oh, okay. Oh, then you see everything that's so messy. Oh well, life is not perfect. I want to talk about what it's going to take. This was on my mind because I was doing some deep thinking about how I want to show up in the world and the types of conversations that I want to be having and the types of conversations that I am having and how well I describe those conversations to other people. And I realized that I'm having conversations that are in a very different space than what I've shared on my website. So I'm doing some thinking about that and how I can, close the gap between the two. And I started thinking about people. It's very general, but people who are stressed out. People who are like, yeah, but I'm anxious. Yeah, but my mind won't stop working. Yeah, but I have panic attacks. Yeah, but and I don't mean people with who are going through a biochemical process that's keeping them really trapped. I don't mean anything that I'm about to say. I'll be very clear. I don't mean anything that I'm about to say to in any way imply that it's all in your head, you're making it up, and that you don't need professional support. Because I 100% believe in professional support, particularly if that's what it's going to take for you. And you are the most important part, right? You, getting the help that you need. And there are other people who are just living with a general level of stress that maybe it's not in the space of a breakdown or not in the space of needing real biochemical support. So what about those people? And that's sort of whom I'm addressing this to. And then really anybody who wants to hear this and feels like, okay, I need to get something out of this. I trust that you're in the right place at the right time. And so am I. So the message of this, right? But first you have to be willing to stop stressing. So let me share from my yoga experience something that I've noticed happens for people. And hey, thanks. And here's what I noticed in the yoga context. People will come to like busy, stressed out. I'll use moms. Moms are a great example. They've got like kids at home, a billion things going on. They're super stressed out and they are running on caffeine until the kids go to bed, at which point they switch to wine, and then they wake up the next morning and they're running on caffeine. So they've got this cycle going, and the cycle is dependent on them keeping track of everything. Their minds are like bam, 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 right? Like we know that mom stereotype from TV, but we also know that person. And many of us, whether you're a mom or not, have been that person. Actually, Mother's Day is coming up. Maybe this is a nice little video for moms. Anyway, side note. So, we've been that person. Or maybe you're that, like, city professional who's, like, on the Blackberry, I'm dating myself, on the phone, emailing and sending this and keeping track with the boss and catching up with friends and going here and catching the bus and catching the train. Like, busy, busy, busy. And that busyness feels good. It's self-defining in a way, right? Same if you're an entrepreneur, same if you're a business owner and you're like, I got it covered, like it feels really fulfilling in the sense that we tell ourselves it means we're on top of it. Like, look at all the things I'm doing. I'm in charge. I'm getting it done. And it feels really good. And at the end of the day, it doesn't feel good because what happens is we stop, the mind doesn't stop. And now we're in this cycle where we're like, why can't I get the mind to stop? Well, we're training it not to stop. And we're rewarding ourselves for it not stopping. And we're relying on it not stopping. So all of a sudden you want to stop and rest. And it's like, and you can't sleep. And you can't rest. And you never feel very good. And you're overly exhausted. Well, now we're in a little bit of a pickle. So I want to talk about that. And when I see people from a yogic context come in with that level of stress and they're like, I really need to rest. I'm like, great, let's do some restorative poses. Let's do some things that are deeply healing for the body so you get deep rest in a short amount of time. What I hear inevitably is, I can't risk being tired because if I drop this, then I'll never be able to cope with the needs of my day. And this is the title. But first you have to be willing to stop stressing. So many of us have had this experience. You go on vacation. The first 3 days you're like, I need to sleep and catch up. Right? And then after day 4, we're like, okie dokie now. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? Because you bounce back, right? Your body's exhausted for a while and then you bounce back. And the same thing is true when you decide to make a change that involves the way that you've always been. So I say this to my yoga students. I say, look, I get it. You're afraid of being tired. You're afraid of dropping the level of tension that you're running with because that's the level that keeps everything moving. But after the adjustment period, you're going to bounce back with an energy that's deeper and greater and far more fulfilling than you've ever had before. So stress is one way to get things done. I agree. It works. I've done it myself. It feels great. Or it doesn't feel great, but it gets things done. And it makes our minds feel great, right? Because we feel good about ourselves and everything we're doing. But when it takes a toll on the body, we've got to find a different way. And I know it's scary. And that means that many of us aren't actually willing to find the different way. We say we want to find a different way. We say we want to be calmer. We say we want to feel better. We say we don't want to rush around so much. We say we want the mind to stop spinning. But we're not actually willing to go through that uncomfortable period because we're not convinced that we're actually going to be able to live and survive and meet the needs of our daily lives without stress. And again, this is the title of this. But first, you have to be willing to stop stressing, because I get that it's really scary. I get it, because we don't know how could we possibly get to this level of functioning without that level of stress. And there's really no good way to say it other than it's possible, right? It's just possible. You got to trust me on this one. You know, there are some things in life we can't actually explain until you experience them. And that makes it terrifying for people who really want some reassurance, because if they drop the ball, guess what? It's not just like, oh, I dropped the ball and somebody's upset with me. It's like your family and your dynamic and your jobs and potentially life or death, depending on what you do and how many kids you have and all of that. Like, so dropping the ball isn't a little thing. And I'm not trying to, I get that. I get that this is very serious to everybody who has stress and wants to feel differently but doesn't know how to get there. Because when we say something like, yeah, just trust me, it'll be better on the other side, they're like, yeah, I need that written down in guarantee and a gold stamp. Right? Because the risk is so high. But the risk of staying stressed is also incredibly high. To your health, to your mental health, to your emotional health, to the well-being of the people in your life, to your relationships, to everything, right? And we can decide to make a change. We can decide to make a change before we get to the level of crisis, or we can play a really big risk with our own health and sanity and relationships and push it. And push it till we have a breakdown, a panic attack, a situation where we now need to find a different way. But I don't like playing games with our health. I just don't think it's safe, right? It's not a good thing to do. It's like not really wanting to go to work, so you like pretend to get sick and then you actually do get sick. Like, why? Just say you don't want to go to work. You know, don't play games with your health. But health is a really good indicator of when we finally reach the breaking point, right? So here's what I want you to just assess for yourself. Do you really want to keep going down this path just because that space in between is a little bit risky and you're not 100% convinced that it's going to be better? Knowing that the risk that you're taking is the risk to everything, because the change is happening one way or another, right? The change is going to happen because your body and health can't sustain it, or your relationships can't sustain it, or because you decide to take an action preemptively. But the change is inevitable. So it's not like, oh, I can just keep running until my kids are 18, or I finally am the boss, or blah, blah, blah. Because guess what? Like, you move up through the ranks, now you're the boss, you're still just as busy. Like, things don't change when we're in a habitual way of being. Because it's how we are, not how life is. If you look at, oh, you probably can't see them. There's plants right across from me. How do I flip that? You're going to see stuff. Like, if you check out those plants, they're just chilling. They're chilling. They are in no way stressed out about growing. They're growing as fast as they can. They're changing every day. They're moving around. You can actually see them moving right now. But that's it. They're not like freaking out about it. And so tomorrow they'll be chilling and growing just as much as they're chilling and growing today. But we're in like this big hurry, right? To like get everything done because it's all on the list, and then we finally get to the end of the day and we're just going to start over tomorrow, and it's exhausting and it's draining. And when we're in the habit of doing that, the habit doesn't stop just because things stop, right? You could have a blank slate, and guess what you're left with? A mind that's spinning out, and now you feel insane. And that feeling sucks. It just sucks. I get it. It really sucks. So this is where I'm trying to give a preemptive invitation here, right? Like preemptively help yourself before we get to that point of crisis. And the only way to do that is to first decide that you're willing to stop stressing. Because we might not know what the promised land of not being stressed feels like and looks like. We may not even believe that it's possible because we're so in this way of being. Our mind has always been like this as far as we remember. We don't, whatever it is. And there's probably benefits to it, right? You get stuff done. You feel good about yourself. You feel validated that you're getting things done. Like, we don't do things that don't make us feel good in some way or make us feel successful. So we've got this wishy-washy promised land we're not sure about. We've got this way of being that kind of sucks, that we don't like how it feels, but it gets stuff done. And that's got some benefits to it. Plus, maybe it's kind of fun every now and then to feel super capable. So how do we then decide, like, oh yeah, I'm going to be different? More than just lip service of, I wish I was calmer. I wish I didn't have this. I wish I wasn't so stressed. Because that's lip service that most of us give every day in conversations with friends and colleagues. Right? Like, oh, I'm so stressed out. Oh, I'm so stressed. I have so much on my plate. I have so much to do. Like, all of that's lip service, because if we're not actively deciding to be different and explore what that's like, then we really don't want it. We really don't want it. So again, going back to the title of this, but first you need to decide that you're willing to stop stressing. Because if you're willing to stop stressing, then a whole new world opens up. And that world is a little bit shaky at first. I'm not going to lie to you and say it's smooth sailing. Like, when we decide to totally change our way of being, the body is like, I'm sorry, what? Hold up now, right? And the body reacts, the mind reacts, the emotions react. We may sleep, we may be exhausted. We may be completely on edge because, like, the body's used to being on edge, but it has nothing to give itself edge to. So we just have the feeling come up with no impetus, no rationale, and that can be scary. Like, oh, I just feel like this. This is just me. What is this? I guess I should find something to do with this feeling. And then we stop, right? Because we're not trying to stress. We're trying to observe the stress response. We're trying to observe the habits we've gotten into, but not buy into them anymore, not feed into them anymore. So yeah, there's some discomfort there. There's teaching an old dog new tricks. The mind and the body and the emotions are an old dog if you've been stressed for a while. But if you want to change it, and if you're willing to change it, oh well, that's what it takes. It takes a little bit of a stepping into the unknown. Just like, one of my clients today, every time I think about her, she cries. This woman I cry. Every time I think about her, she cries. That would be magic on a different level. Every time I think about her, I want to cry. She's in her 70s. I think she's in her 70s. Late 60s, 70s, whatever. If you're watching, hopefully I did not offend you by not knowing your age. You are timeless. And this woman, I kid you not, after all these years, 47 years of marriage or something really amazing, is falling in love with her husband. And she says to me today, I'm scared because falling in love is vulnerable. This is somebody she's known longer than I've been alive by a while, right? And she's scared because she's falling in love, because it's vulnerable to change. It's vulnerable to be different. It's vulnerable to have been feeling like you're in control of your environment, which is what we do when we're like, bam, 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 bam. That's us being in control of the environment, right? I got this covered and this covered and this covered and this covered and this covered. That's control. Control equals stress, because life is uncontrollable. Life is not linear. Life is curvy, right? And wiggly and wobbly and all over the place. And we can't control it. And so when we go from trying to have control to being in a more peaceful state in our minds, in our bodies, in our emotions, it's vulnerable because we're letting go of control. We're releasing a little bit of the panic of, what's going to happen if I don't show up for every single thing in the same way that I used to? Not meaning that you're canceling things or flaking out, but if you don't show up in the same way, meaning that you are not in charge. What's going to happen if you let somebody else clean the house? Maybe it's not going to be nearly as nice as you like it, but it's done. Or, the panic is in you, but that's your habitual response. Life doesn't necessarily care. The house doesn't necessarily care. Other people might not necessarily care, right? But we can feel that but I want it my way. But first, we have to agree to stop stressing, right? Be in that discomfort. Be in that discomfort of not being in control. I'm trying to think of other examples. There's just hundreds that I could think of, but hopefully you're thinking of one that's relevant to your life, because that's the most important, right? Letting somebody on your team help you out with things. Letting, customers and clients have slightly different interactions than you might be used to. Maybe not constantly texting the people that you always text to stay in the loop, and just let it go a little bit. The world probably won't end, right? The world probably won't end. And even if you do have to continually show up because, say, you're the president or the director of the United Nations, right? And the world might end if you don't show up. It doesn't mean we have to show up with stress. Oh, I'm so glad. It doesn't mean that we have to show up feeling like I have to be here or everything's going to crap, because that's the control. We only play our role. And our role is just the role that we can bring to it, right? So I'm here, I make decisions, I move on. I'm here, I help with things, I move on. I'm here, I do this, I move on. But controlling is very different. It's because I'm here, everything happens. Do you see the subtle difference between showing up, playing the role that needs to be played based on the environment and the experience, versus creating the environment experience because you're there? And one is much more stressful than the other, because one, all of it's on you. All of it's on you. And the other one, you can just do your best. You can do your best and realize that it's not all on you. I know this may be very hard to believe. It's literally like somebody who's never been swimming and me being like, just get in the water. It's really nice in the water. And they're like, I've never touched water before. I don't know if I trust water. And I'm like, just get in the water. It's so nice in the water, right? But there again, we have to be willing to not be stressed in order to explore what the alternatives are. Because the alternatives are vulnerable. The alternatives are different. They're new. It's breaking habits, and it's scary. It's going to take work. It takes work to train ourselves to be different, because when we have stress, we have lots of habits based on stress. We might have coffee, we might have alcohol, we might have sugar, we might have friendships based entirely on how stressed we are and complaining about that. We may have a sense of self that's completely self-building and self-rewarding based on stress and how much we get done. We may have conversations with our partners entirely based on how stressed we are. We may have relationships with doctors. We may have diseases that we're really clinging to as being stress-based, like ulcers and things like that. Again, not trying to discredit anybody's illness, but saying some of us do create those from stress, and we use those as a badge of honor. I know I did in high school. I was like, I have an ulcer. I'm so stressed. What is a high school kid doing with an ulcer? Right? What was I doing? That should have been the first wake-up call. It wasn't, by the way. But, we use these things as a badge of honor. So a lot of our life has to change when we decide to be different. But first, you have to be willing to stop being stressed, because we have to be willing to change all of those aspects. We have to be willing to change the badges of honor to something more meaningful for us, that is more fulfilling than keeping us stuck in a cycle of stress. We have to be willing to sit in the discomfort of the habits as they're changing, and seeing our own habits and our own desire to stay in this spiraling space because of whatever. It keeps us busy, it keeps us energized, it keeps us going. It makes us not have to sit quietly and ponder the meaning of life and am I meaningless? Because I'll tell you what, a lot of us stay busy so that we don't have to face that question. Do I like myself? Am I meaningful? Is my life worthwhile? I would say 90% of people spend their entire lives busy just to avoid that question. So there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of reasons we would be stressed. And if there was no shame in saying, you know what? You're right, I don't want to face that. I'm going to keep with this for a little bit. Great. But know yourself. Know that you made a conscious choice. You're not the victim of life and stress, right? You've chosen a way of being that's giving you benefits. It's possible at some point you outgrow those benefits, and hopefully you choose to outgrow them before they take a serious toll on your body or your relationships or your mind. Because don't play games with your health, right? So if you are ready to outgrow them, this really is the first line of questioning. What do I get from being stressed? What do I really get from it? What does it really give me? Does it give me a sense of authority? Does it give me a sense of usefulness isn't the right word, but yeah, basically like competence. Does it help me stay busy so I don't have to face deeper emotions or traumas from my past or fears that I have or fears that I'm never going to do what I really want to do? You know, sometimes we stay stressed to avoid that we're not actually doing what we want. So start with that line of questioning. Really explore if you're willing to not be stressed. And if you're not, if you're like, I really need this, it's actually covering up some stuff that I'm not ready to deal with, great. You know yourself, you've made a choice. And you've made an empowered choice for yourself. But at some point, we're still going to have to take the stress lid off, right? For many of us. Not everybody. Some people are like this till they die. Doesn't feel very good though. I can guarantee, because I see them in the yoga room. So if you're serious about this calming thing, then we take some action, right? And the action isn't always comfortable. Yes, we can seek out meditations, awesome. We can seek out ways to calm ourselves down, beautiful. Massage, going for walks, being out in nature, spending time quietly. And the key is to not judge yourself for what comes up. Because many people say, well, I can't meditate because my mind races. Who told you the mind wasn't going to race? You've been training your mind to race for decades. Why would you think, because you sat down for 10 minutes in silence, that it wasn't going to race? That's crazy. So don't judge yourself, right? Don't judge yourself for the habits that are still showing up. Don't judge yourself for wanting to get up right away. Don't judge yourself for being antsy. Don't judge yourself for being like, oh, I just can't, this isn't comfortable. I don't want to be here. I'm just making lists in my head of all the things I should do. That's normal. That's the habit. That's the habit. It's the hangover of the habit. And that habit's going to be there for as long as it's there until we have a new habit in place. And that new habit can be like, oh, half a second of peace. That was nice, right? And I know this from personal experience. I didn't go from being like super stressed and tight in the body and like this and like major stomach issues and heart palpitations and other issues and like working in the government. I didn't go from that to sitting on the floor right now making a video overnight, right? It's been 10 years. It's been a good 10 years. 11 years since I started taking yoga. No, maybe a little bit more. 12 years since I started going. And and so much of this for me, I went to a heart doctor when I worked for the government, and I was like having palpitations, and that runs in my family, and I was like, oh gosh, here it goes. I'm so important and high-powered and stressed. I've got heart problems at 23 or whatever it was, 25. And the doctor, bless him, comes in and goes, lift your legs up. And I was laying flat on a table. He's like, asked me to do a leg lift. And I couldn't do it. And he was like, your core is weak. You're stressed out. Go take yoga. Your heart's fine. And that's what got me into yoga. Kid you not. I'd taken it before, but this is what got me into it. I was like, oh, all right. Little truth talk there. Thank you, doctor. And where's I going with that? So there's these hangovers though. So it wasn't like I went to yoga and all of a sudden I'm like a totally blissed out yogi. I was miserable. This stack of blankets is actually a really good, I don't know how I can show this to you. This stack of blankets right here, you see it? It's like a bolster and then like all these blankets. That's what I would have, that's what I would have to sit on. Sorry guys, hold on. You're going all over the place. That's what I would have to sit on in yoga classes. I couldn't sit on the floor. My hips were a mess. So take the pressure off yourself, right? Take the pressure off yourself. There's going to be a period in between when the mind still races, the body's still uncomfortable, we still have all these thoughts, we still have all these cravings, we can't relax, we can't sleep. It's just the habit. Let it run its course. And we don't get rid of habits by giving back into them. We get rid of habits by staying firm and choosing to go with what we've planned anyway. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, watch Super Nanny, because that woman's amazing at creating new habits. Legit amazing. Regardless of what you think of her parenting skills, she's amazing at creating new habits. And so that's what it takes. We just make a decision. We've just made a decision. I am no longer available to be stressed. I am no longer available to use my health, my sanity, and my relationships and to do things at the expense of those. I am no longer willing to be the person who runs my life in a way that is contrary to the health of me and my relationships. And we just make that a really firm commitment. And then we get willing to be uncomfortable and very aware of all the ways that stress saves us from something, from worry, from fear, from feeling out of control, from feeling vulnerable. And we get comfy with that. Never quite comfy, but we get comfortable with the unknowing of it. And slowly but surely over time, we stop living on stress as our way of being in the world. Okay. I hope that made sense. It did to me. If you have any questions, pop them below, send me a message. It's worth it. It's worth it, but we have to start with really asking, are we willing to stop stressing? This is how I start all like the challenges that I run, the 30-day challenges. This is how we start. Get clear on what you want to break. Tell me what's good about that way of being. Tell me what's bad about that belief. And then really legitimately answer seriously, are you willing to drop the benefits for the potential of the gains that we aren't sure of? Because that's a big risk. It is a big risk. But particularly with stress, the risk is worth it. The risk is worth it because the downsides are so detrimental to your health. Mental, emotional, physical. And even though our culture loves stress, right? Like every TV show is all about stress and this and going everywhere and being in charge of everything. Like we've glorified stress, but it's just why it doesn't feel good. Like it just doesn't feel good. We can self-aggrandize in other ways. Self-aggrandize by being the most chill person you know. Self-aggrandize by being like the most laid back and easygoing person you know. We don't have to self-aggrandize through stress. Okay. Let me know if you have questions.